the Sunday morning class, we were talking about the importance of the political leadership and the importance of having that conform to what God expects. So we're following God's will and the influences that are good or evil based upon the decisions that are made in that sphere. And we also had Proverbs 30 and 31 as part of the reading, so it seemed fitting to me to discuss another aspect of influence in society and the importance of godly representation. Not really, that's not the right word. Godly impact on the decisions that are made in the domestic realm. And I don't mean domestic only in the sense of in the house, in the home, although that is important. It could also be commercial and anything that's not political. So we can kind of divide up the society into two parts, the political and the domestic. And the political tends to be run primarily by men, and it's that way in this country, but it's always been that way throughout history, and most of that is because most of the political things that have occurred in history have been won through battle, right, through war, and that's the kind of people that have set up societies. And then, of course, the domestic is not just for women. It's not because it's anything that's not political, but it is primarily populated by women. And so there's those two different ones. And not that they're opposed to each other. They should work hand in hand really well. But especially if it's godly in the top of it. So we're going to look at that from the perspective of Proverbs 31 and talk about the points that are there and kind of make a comparison and contrast between the political and the domestic, and maybe emphasize some of the things we did last week or Sunday about how we can make changes, hopefully that we can make changes in society for the best. So let's go ahead and have a prayer and we can get started. Father, thank you for all that you've done for us, for the love that you've shown to us and the abilities that we have to come together. We thank you for the opportunity to serve you, and we pray that as we meet people in the community that we will be good stewards of our time and do the things that are necessary and good and pleasing, that are of service to other people and mostly as service to you, so that you can be glorified by the things that we say and do. I pray, Lord, that you'll forgive us of our sins, help us as we face temptations, that we will be able to endure those things and find that way of escape that you promised to us. Help us, forgive us when we fail you. Help us to make the changes necessary to ensure that we don't do those things anymore. We thank you, Father, for the remission of sins that's been provided by the sacrifice of your Son and how he's drawn us to him, and we thank you that you've allowed us to come and be a part of your family. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. All right, let's see. Before I do that, I wanted to come into, no, I'm going to do that later. If we have enough time, I'm going to look into some of the arguments that I've heard recently about the women's roles in the church and things like this, especially talking about the idea of culture. So that's a very big one. It almost comes back to, in all cases, 1 Timothy chapter 2 and 1 Corinthians 11 and other passages, almost always comes back to the idea of culture as an argument against having separation of responsibilities, that kind of thing. But today, for now, we're going to look at this page, if you have it. So we're going to look in Proverbs 31, and from 10 to 31 is the passage we're going to be looking at. But I wanted you to note here this comparison or contrast of the political versus the domestic. And in the top row, we have that the political focuses on national governance and decision-making it'd be related to political laws, things like that. And the domestic leadership obviously focuses on household management and community influence. So there's definitely overlap, right? But it's different kinds of influence. The overlap is not of the same structure, because the home and the domestic responsibilities, which we all understand this, aren't the same kind of focus as the political. So there's laws that are made from the outside trying to control humanity. That would be the policies and politics. They want to be able to control, and really I think it's to prevent outliers. It's to prevent people from going too far one way or another. The other side of that, so it's from the outside in. It's controlling the people from the outside. And the other factor of this with the domestic part in society is really about the inside out. That's the control of the heart. And that has always been where God has started and where God looks to us. But I say always, He did actually create governments, and He did actually install governments, and the governments that we have now are because of His power and His wisdom. So He has both of those coming into, and they should interact with one another to some degree. So one, the focus is on the governance and decision making, and the domestic leadership as relates to household management, community influences, that kind of thing. And I think it's important to note this, because I haven't heard anyone in the church here complain about women. I've never had any women complain about being a woman. I've heard other places women complaining about the fact that they just happen to be born the wrong gender, so they can't do anything. I've never heard that here, because that's not the attitude that you have. The attitude that you have is we have different functions, and we can function very well in the places that we are. But a lot of people on the outside look at us and say, "Oh, your women are so oppressed. They're so put upon." And the reason that you're put upon is because you can't be here for 3 hours a week. That's essentially what it comes down to, because we have men in the services for Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. And because of that, you're so oppressed because you can't do anything. Well, first of all, we all know that this 3 hours that we're together, 4 hours, I guess, if we're there all together at the same at all places, at all times, that's a very small fraction of what Christianity is about, isn't it? It's an important part of what it's about, but it's a very small fraction. And so I think it's kind of foolish to think, well, it kind of shows the heart. If the only reason that women are upset is because they can't be in power, what does that say about their desire for power? They have a desire for power, just like men do. And that's not necessarily the reason that you assume power. When we put in elders, this topic came up a bunch, because one of the first rules of qualification for an elder is what? Well, yes, but nope. Male, yes, who desires the office. That's first. If you don't want it, you're not going to do it. So we had to ask the question. I've actually heard people say, well, if you desire the office, then that makes me question whether or not you're qualified. Because who desires to be, you're just wanting to get in and control people. Now, isn't there some validity to that point? There is some validity, because some people want it way too bad. They want it way too much, and they just want power. Well, if any man came up and you just knew he just wanted power, he wanted to be able to control everybody and have everything go his way, he wouldn't be qualified to be an elder, right? Why? Because of that attitude. So if women have the same attitude, they wouldn't qualify to be an elder anyway. So I understand there's a lot of things going on here, but what has happened in our society, and even looking at the church and even in society as a whole, is we've created this idea that the domestic is inferior to the political, to the powerful, right? Which is completely backwards from how God has seen things. How is it generally that God has always approached His relationship to his people? Has it always been laws-based or heart-based? Heart-based. And who is primarily the ones who have the most influence in that kind of realm and domain of the heart-based influences? Generally speaking, it's women. Why? Okay, you're better nurturers, usually, yes, yeah. Yeah, we can work on that and develop it. It's like physical strength, right? Mostly men are stronger than women. There's some exceptions to that, but we wouldn't look at a woman and say, "Hey, you have the ability to lift weights. Why aren't you as strong as men?" We don't say that. Why? Because we accept the fact that men are generally stronger than women physically, and we also generally accept the fact that women are better nurturers, even though a man can nurture just as much as a woman. But we generally don't think that way, all right? Another factor related to that, though, is what? She's in the home. Yeah, she's usually more in the home actively. And yeah, I realize that the days of the stay-at-home mom and things like this are just almost gone. But and even in the Old Testament times and New Testament times, it really wasn't like we think of it as a stay-at-home mom. But they generally were workers around the home, and they could do other things, which we'll see in Proverbs 31. Yeah.
The Apostle Paul, he made it a point to point out Timothy's mother and grandmother.
Yeah.
Were the reason why that he was the man that he was.
Right. And so it's sad. Some of that is because society has geared it up to make us think that power and domestic, this is how it works. When in actuality, I don't know if it's reversed, but it's at least equal. It's always been that way with God. But it's sad the kind of conditions that we've set up, and there may be a lot of reasons for it. Some of the things that women have fought for are not necessarily bad as far as politically. It's not that it's a bad thing. It's that we've lost the emphasis in so many people rushing to women rushing to become men. This is my opinion, but rushing to become men, that we've lost something in what women are and how women contribute to society. And not just women, men and women in this domestic realm. Because as I said before, it was very different back in the New Testament times. It was also very different for men in the New Testament times. There were people who would sell things like this, but primarily people would be out working in the fields. What would they do with their kids? Whatever they did, their kids went with them. They did things with their kids, and that's how they lived. People assume that Jesus was taught to be a carpenter. Why is that? Because his father was a carpenter. Yeah, it was that's how things worked. And now it's not like that at all. And it's just kind of geared toward not that. So anyway, it is important, I think, to recognize it. So some of that is a society's fault. Some of that is because people have looked at the church and said, "Hey, I can't believe how repressive you are." And some of it is, if we're honest, it's because we haven't really talked about this stuff enough. We haven't really brought out these balances like we should. And it could be because we just don't think about it, or it could be because we're a little bit afraid to discuss it. Because any topic like that comes up, you run the risk of somebody become offended, or somebody in the community hearing about it and say, "Oh, I can't see you guys. I can't believe how oppressive you are." Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Right. Yes, that's right. And so this is talking about headship. That is part of it. And sometimes that is, like I said, sometimes that is kind of abused. But it is fact. It is the way it works. Yeah.
I guess I'm not saying it could be abused to a certain point.
Yeah.
But I think that
Yes. Yeah, that's right. That's correct. So that doesn't mean that we don't have roles, but the yeah, there is. Uh-huh.
You know, an awful lot of those guys, we like to quote fifth chapter of Ephesians. Okay, all the way up until the first 23.
Where it says that you give your life.
The wives are supposed to obey their husbands. But verse 23 pretty much nails it. Okay. Yes, sir. It says, husbands, you're to love your wives the way that the Lord loved the church.
Yeah.
Well, how did the Lord love the church?
Yeah. Yeah. So leadership is a service that we perform, and it's for the sake of the family. So anyway, there's a lot there, but what we want to emphasize here is this is not about power structures. It's a different kind of influence, though. So the second line here is that it impacts the spiritual and political well-being of a nation. That's the political leadership, and it does impact the spiritual well-being. For example, does the morality of the president affect the rest of the people here? Yeah. Because of what he implements, that's true. And because of the things that he promotes or identifies with, there have been lots and lots of people who have been given green lights. I'm going to say on both sides of the aisle. We can be fair. But when you have a president that walks into the White House and immediately starts talking about transgenderism as a good thing, you're going to have, that's a signal. The signal is all the transgenders can now have their whatever they want because we got a guy in there that's on our side. So yeah, it does have an impact. Domestic leadership impacts the well-being and prosperity of the family and the community. So it starts with the political. I think it's a larger scope. It affects everyone, but in the domestic part, it starts with the family, and that's how the family can influence the community, right? So we influence community by our presence, and that's an important idea too. The third one here is leadership is determined by birthright or military power, and in the third one, leadership is demonstrated through character and actions, and those are important distinctions. It doesn't mean that there are no roles. It just means that you earn your ability to influence other people, and that's something that's earned in this way. How do you earn your ability to influence people in the political realm? Yeah, you don't really earn it. You get it. You take it somehow, and it could be by money, it could be by power, it could be all kinds of ways. All right, fourth one down. Kings are accountable to God for their leadership, and here in this case, the virtuous woman is accountable to God and her family. So there's still accountability, and based on that, God deals with kings differently than families, right? The impact is more immediate in the political realm, but the impact of the family actually can be far greater in the long term if it works out right. Examples of that would be, well, all the kings that we talked about: Solomon, Rehoboam, Jeroboam, Asa, Jehoshaphat. What was the result of the structure and the morality, character of Israel when they had a bad king? They turned to idols, oppression started coming in, people were taking advantage of other people, all kinds of things. It's just become a free-for-all. But then we have people like, what did it do to the economy? It might have. Probably not well, not much. But think about with Solomon. What was Solomon's influence in the economy when he was living in wisdom? Yes, they were very well off and very blessed. at first. Now, it continued on because he had billions and billions of dollars. Remember, the silver was so common that it was like stone. I can't imagine what that would be like. But then we have examples of this domestically in the virtuous woman of Proverbs 31. So this is how influence can be had, especially we're talking about in the realm of women, in the realm of the domestic and society in that sense, in that perspective. Key qualities is wisdom, righteousness, and obedience to God. And on the other side is integrity, diligence, and wisdom, compassion and wisdom. Many of the same qualities, but for a ruler in the political realm to rule wisely and well and godly, righteousness and obedience to God is paramount. Now, does it change any for women or in the domestic? No, it doesn't change any, but it's a little bit different emphasis. So we have integrity and diligence and compassion and wisdom. A king can tell people, I want this done, and he has all kinds of people working on it. He doesn't have to do it himself. But in a family, if it's going to be done, the family has to do it. So those are two different ways of looking at it. All right, negative examples, kings who turn to idolatry and wickedness, and which we saw a lot of. Negative example would be the contentious woman in Proverbs 21, 9 and 19. I can't remember what those were. Let me look at those. Since we're contrasting the women here. 21:9. Oh, better to dwell in the corner of a housetop than a house shared with a contentious woman. And better to dwell in the wilderness than with a contentious and angry woman. So that's it. I mean, those are the contrasts that we have in the negative sense. And the impact is national prosperity or decline of the spiritual state of people. And the impact in the other realm is family stability, community well-being, and children's legacies. So this is furthering on the generations. And one of the things that the Muslims have going for them is that they're almost guaranteed that the next generation will continue their Muslim faith. You know how? Because they're having lots of kids, and they're instilling that in their kids, in the families. There's no question about it. So what is in the Western world, and even in Europe, in Europe and in America, what is the birth rate of non-Muslim? You know? Or less. People are starting to raise alarms that China's even figuring this out. They're raising alarms that our population is going to nosedive and in the future. And the problem with not having enough kids is, well, there's a lot of problems with it, but one of them is that eventually most of the people who are alive are older people and not younger. And if you have a few younger people and a lot of older people, the younger people can't take care of all the older people. They can't do it. There's no way they can. They got to take care of themselves and take care of 3 or 4 other people, right? So financially, physically, yeah, that's right. And it also doesn't bode well for us progressing and growing and flourishing. But also, would you say that as a country or in Western civilization, that we're doing a good job of instilling in our kids our values? And not at all. No, not at all. Yeah, it's not happening. And there are a lot of factors for that, but we have to recognize that there's some truth there. So we have definitely dropped the ball. Now, in America, we can definitely say that we have mastered the political. I mean, look at all the places we are. I saw a thing the other day that said, I can't remember the numbers. I'm not going to tell you the numbers. But they listed how many countries are in the world, and then they listed how many countries we have a base, and a military base in the world, and it was almost the same. We control the world because we figured out this politics thing. But we haven't figured out the domestic part yet. And that's the part that we've destroyed. Yeah.
we're influenced, they're influencing us. But what I was going to say was that, after where it said leadership is determined by birthright or power.
Mm-hmm.
Even further up. But I was told as a child, and I remember in a sermon, that, the brother that was preaching the sermon said the best influence that the men in our church could have was to choose one thing in the community that he could succeed at, whether it was the school system, the county boards,
Mm-hmm.
even the political structure of the city or the county.
Yeah.
And if they would please get into those sections, they have more influence. Not as nationwide, but countywide, it would be a better influence.
Of course. Yeah, that's right. And we don't hear that kind of stuff now. That's what I've been saying for years. It's like we need to find the things that we're good at and get into the communities and make an impact. Why am I saying that? Because that's how it works. If we hope to have impact and influence on this nation, there are only two ways to go about it: the political and the domestic. And if we're not going to be in the political, we're not going to make much of an impact. Don't even know if we can be. I mean, could you imagine running today on a strictly biblical position? You wouldn't get any votes. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but our best hope of influence is to get into the community, and that's part of the domestic part of what I'm talking about. So, all right. Anyone else have any thoughts? Yeah.
Something we need to keep in mind. I've seen it many times that a good Christian man, highly influential in the community, steps up politically and he changes, and pretty soon he's not a faithful Christian man. The upper politics, to continue into it, is going to give up righteousness.
Yeah, it would be really hard to hold on to it for sure. To a degree, it's always been that way, but I think now it's definitely worse. Yeah.
You know, y'all heard me make this point before, but up until the late 1800s, there were some very godly men in Washington, even in the White House. But David Livingston, what he taught and what he preached, we're talking about 1885 to 1900.
Mm-hmm.
That a Christian cannot participate in any form of government. And yes, David Lipscomb was a very devout, godly man in Christianity. He did an awful lot of good for the Lord's church, especially here in the U.S. But being a man, he could be an error.
Yeah, I think he was wrong on that.
He was definitely an error, because if you take all the Christians out of any organization, you immediately turn it over to the devil.
Yep.
I mean, that's just the simple logic of what's taking place.
That's right. And it used to be, this was the kind of, I don't remember it in my lifetime, but I've read things from like the 50s and the 40s even, where it was expected that, well, the people who were in the best places in the community would be Christians. That, of course, we would run for those kinds of things. We would try to be in those situations. Why? Because that's where we're going to make the most influence, the most impact. Yeah.
I want to say, from the domestic side of things, as you mentioned, in essence, our lack of capacity or integrity of being able to instill the type of values that our children should have when they get older. I mean, we can look to see it's fairly plain what has taken place of that is all the devices that they always have in their lap. Like mine. Now, that's not reflective of the congregation at all. But when I visited, not recently when I visited Israel, they're coming in front of me, carrying the whole entire sermon. Their daughter was just in front there. She was old enough to know how to use it fairly adeptly, so why wasn't she paying attention? She was just playing the game the whole time.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it, Jeff. I wish I would have said somewhere else.
Yeah. I know. I've seen that. I've seen that with books even.
But I say that because I don't think that the church as a whole, not the institution, but the members thereof, should have a part in that. Now, that is to say, our purpose is not to entertain. we, as individuals, pursue that mode of work of some kind, which is what I'm trying to do, but which is essentially to say that there's not enough content out there now, which was commonplace perhaps in the 50s, that instills good moral values that are so lacking in today's time.
Yeah.
People are going out.
We have to get into the world in the places that we don't really want to be necessarily. And I've seen that. I think that Facebook is a good example of that. I think we can have a lot of impact and influence on other people. It's a slow one, and it's one that people don't recognize, and you may never see any results from it, but you can have impact. I've had a lot of people message me and tell me how much they appreciate things that I've said, that they've actually learned. Wow. It could be better, but it's a small impact, right? But if we all are making an impact, and yeah, there are a lot of problems with it, I know. Has somebody else had a hand up? No? Okay.
You know, Jason, as an analogy, a ream of paper typically has got 500 sheets. Each sheet is, I can't remember what the thickness is, but it's less than a millimeter, right? You know, and so it's not very thick. So you call it having a small influence, but you put 5 of them 500 together, and you got a thick ream of paper.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, that's essentially what we're talking about.
That's right. And I think one of the things that we do well in the church is post warnings about dangers of different things. But what we don't do well is say, okay, here's a danger, but what can we do to either overcome the danger, or what can we do to actually make an impact for good? And if we take away the danger, then it's a good thing, right? And I know that's a very complicated, when you get into social media, it complicates everything. Not just the factors of what's there, but also time factors and all kinds of things. But it is worth thinking about. And we typically, it's not just the churches of Christ. The denominational world has this problem too. The more conservative minded you are, the more you resist change. So when society has changed drastically, we have not yet caught up to where society has changed to. We don't know how to deal with the people in the changes that they've made. I'm not suggesting that we change to fit. I'm saying that we haven't figured out. We're still dealing with people as if we're in the 1970s instead of dealing with the people as if we're in the 2020s. And a lot of that is the digital frontier, things that I think we think, well, it's a fad. It's going to go away eventually. Not in your lifetime. Not in my lifetime. We're going to die with people on social media, and they're going to be mourning our deaths on social media, and that's how it's going to work. And maybe even for another generation after that. It may eventually die out, but we have to be able to pivot, right? This is a completely different subject, but let's look in Proverbs 31. One of the things about Proverbs 31, from 10 through 31, is that this is an acrostic of the Hebrew alphabet. And so from A to Z, this is a discourse on a worthy woman. He says, who can find a virtuous wife? The word here for virtuous is a word of means valor, a wife of valor. And this is talking about moral excellence. And also we need to recognize, does everyone's Bible have the question, who can find a virtuous wife or something like that? A wife of noble character? Yeah, so it's the question kind of in our minds kind of implies, well, there are not any. If you say who can find one, that's saying, well, there are not any. It's actually not what he's saying. It's actually simply a didactic formula. It's a way of that the Hebrews would open up the discussion of if you were wanting to find a virtuous woman, what would she look like? And so then he goes on to describe. So I don't think that it's saying, oh, there's not any, because why would he then explain how she acts if there aren't any, right? But anyway, Says for her, the heart of her husband safely trusts her, so he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and willingly works with her hands. She is like the merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She also rises while it's yet night and provides food for her household and a portion for her maidservant. She considers a field and buys it. From her profit she plants a vineyard. She girds herself with strength and strengthens her arms. She perceives that her merchandise is good and her lamp does not go out by night. She stretches out her hands to the distaff and her hand holds the spindle. She extends her hand to the poor. Yes, she reaches out her hands to the needy. She's not afraid of snow for her household, for all her household is clothed with scarlet. She makes tapestry of herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them and supplies sashes for merchants. Strength and honor her clothing. She shall rejoice in time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and on her tongue is the law of kindness. She watches over the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many daughters have done well, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is passing, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. All right, this does not sound like a meek, docile, non-impactful person, does it? This is talking about someone who's strong, who has goals, who has activities, and is not relegated to any kind of position. In the position that she's in, she takes full advantage of her strengths, and her whole household benefits from it. And it's similar to what a man should do. The man should be providing and helping and nurturing his family, but this is focusing, of course, on women. It's from different perspectives and different angles. So look at the fact of her character. It says she's trustworthy. Her husband has full confidence in her. What do you think that confidence relates to? All right, same goals. What else? She's dependable. Yeah. It's not related to whether or not she's going to be faithful to him. I mean, it's part of it, but that's a very minor part of this. The faithfulness has to do with he can count on her as part of the team, right? And she's going to be pulling her weight. Whatever she can do, she's going to do it to the best of her ability. All right. Anything else that you can think of? Where does the confidence come from that he has in her? Sorry? Yeah, she proves it. Yeah, she produces it. Yeah. She's proven herself over and over again. Exactly. So when we have all the way back in the Garden of Eden, what was the reason that Eve was made in the first place? To help, yeah. And we've kind of taken the help meat and put them together and called it help meat. And sometimes that has been in culture has been denigrated. But all it means is that we have a helper that is equal to the task. That's what it means. And so, men don't need another man telling us, doing our thing and telling us how to do our thing better. We need someone else who's doing the things that they're good at, that they don't need any help with, that they're doing, right? We're working as a team, not as we're working as a team. Yeah. Yeah, support. Look at the fact that the virtuous woman's diligence and work ethic, 13 through 19. I mean, I don't know. I think, though, that some of y'all may have a really hard time with this one, getting up before the daylight. That's a tough one. Yeah.
Jason, the description that Solomon wrote here of a virtuous woman, to me, Lydia from Philippi.
Yeah, she would fit that.
There in the 16th chapter of Acts. I mean, she fits this description almost to a T, with one exception. Luke doesn't mention her husband.
Yeah, or family. So she may not have been married. I don't know. So
Everything else about her fits this description.
yeah. Yeah, we have. Uh-huh. That's true, but that stops after a little while. I know how it works. That stops after a little while. The first time our kids figured out how to go get a Pop-Tart and pop a VCR tape in the VCR for the first time was magical. We could sleep a little bit. All right, so we have a virtuous woman's diligence and work ethic. 24, she makes linen garments. Now, obviously, this is not a litmus or a list of things. Hey, you're not making your own clothing and you're not making the cloth that you're using for your clothing. Shame on you. That's not the point. The point is in industry, doing what you can, helping out. Then also we have, she considers a field and buys it from her earnings. She plants a vineyard. That doesn't sound like a woman who's oppressed. It sounds like a woman who has money, who has power, who has influence. So all of those things are available. And that's part of humanity, right? So it's not an oppressive thing at all. And how does she earn her money? Well, she works with her hands and sells what she has. Good thing. That doesn't mean that you have to do the same thing, but it is part of the way it works. Also, we see the care for other people. 20 and 21, she extends her hand to the poor. She reaches out her hands to the needy. She's not afraid of snow for her household, for her household is clothed with scarlet. Right? Now, what does that imply? What does that mean? That their household is clothed with scarlet. Yeah, she actually does help provide for the family. She does things to help make sure they have what they need. And that's part of it. So she watches over the affairs of her household. She doesn't eat the bread of idleness. When it says in Titus 2 that older women are to train younger women to be homemakers, the idea there is not someone who is a slave or a servant in that sense, but a servant in the sense of one who rules over her household, that she has things under control in her house. And that's how it works. So then we also have the fourth point here, the virtuous woman's impact and recognition. Her husband is respected at the city gate where he takes a seat among the elders of the land. How does his position in the society reflect on her? How does she have any control over that? What do you mean? Yes. What are you talking about here? Oh, yeah. No, that's for sure. That's for sure. True. There's a lot of truth to that. What kind of impact does I was about to ask, what kind of impact does a noble, strong, sincere woman have on her husband? A good impact, yes. And there is a difference between a controlling. See, that's not what we're seeing here. We're not seeing someone who's a nag. We're seeing someone who is contributing and helping and a helper, right? And that will help her husband become a stronger man as well. And that will just feed on it because she's helping him and he's the head of the house and she's promoting that. He's going to be encouraged to be a leader and he's going to be encouraged to do things he may have never done before. And all of us, if we grow, we have to do things we've never done and we need encouragement. All of us do. So that's part of what's going on here. And the main thought here is that charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And so that's exactly what you should see, and we should recognize that we have a lot of godly women in the church. And that has helped tremendously in our society, and we need you to continue to do that kind of thing. Yeah.
You know, Jacob, this is just my humble opinion, but any man who has a problem being married to or having a wife with the characteristics that Solomon describes here, I'd have to say he's a first-class idiot.
Yeah. And probably a little lazy. Because if she's working all the time, he's got to do something too. All right, very good. Thank you for your discussions.